Welcome back to the Numina podcast, everyone. I'm Sam Tolman. We have Dr. Heather Flood right here. She's holding it together. Don't worry about it. And we recently had an amazing conversation about meditation. And I just got back from a meditation retreat myself. And we were talking and thinking, hey, we should do a little episode on that and not just talk about kind of the deep end of meditation practice, but also just like, how do you get going on a practice? And what does it even mean to practice? You know, I think that's become a popular word, which I have mixed feelings about. But like, what does that mean to do that? And what's helpful? What gets in the way? And how can we get started? How can we support ourselves? So without further ado, I think we're going to just jump right into this conversation.
To the shallow dive.
Yeah, we're going to jump into the shallow end head first.
Yeah.
Get the paramedics ready.
Oh, we're ready.
Great. Yeah.
You're in trouble.
Oh God.
Yeah, so I think it's also important to, let everyone know kind of that you're like a king ding-a-ling, Captain Tying Knots.
I've been
Mr.
called
Balloon Hands.
the captain of tying knots before.
Yeah.
Generally not in positive contexts.
Well,
though.
I mean, do with that what you will.
Yeah. I have told people to walk down me on the walkway.
And they have.
And they consistently in my life have anytime I invite them to.
No, but I think it's important to kind of establish you as like, you are quite the meditator. You have a lot of a depth of knowledge, a depth of study. I think more importantly for this show, you show up and you practice in a really profound way. And so I think that that's awesome and a great resource for us.
That's sweet, Heather. I it's funny to hear that, and I think there's definitely truth to it. Like I've been practicing for about 10 years, and over the last 5 years especially, I've been like really privileged and lucky to help other people through their practice and journey a little bit, and I can talk about that. But it's like coming at a very interesting time to hear you say that, because I just had this long retreat, which was in many respects kind of humbling. I was like, had a lot of doubt, and maybe this is actually a useful place to start. Like, 10 years in, and probably like, hard to know exactly, but probably about 6,000 hours of like seated practice and many more of moving and other practice in. Like, I was on this retreat and I had a lot of doubt about my own practice and where I'm at, and that is just so normal. People get that at the very beginning, and they think, "Oh, I'm just no good at this," and I'm like a few thousand hours in, and I'm like, I might be no good at this, And actually, this is pretty funny. I will share this. The person who led the retreat that I was just at, he's wonderful. He has an excellent book. His name is Daniel Ingram. His book, Mastering the Core Teachings of the Buddha, was very, very influential on my meditation practice. And he was sharing, so somebody was sharing being on retreat with him, and she was saying, I was like a week or two in, and I thought, oh my God, like I'm with Daniel, and he's spending his time with me, and I think I don't even remember how to meditate. And then Daniel was like, yeah, sometimes I think that too. I'm like, Daniel invited me here, I'm here, and I don't even remember how to meditate. I'm like, this is a guy who's done like tens of thousands of hours of practice. So this is just actually a normal thing that comes up.
Yeah.
Why don't we just like start by normalizing that? Like whether you're at the very beginning and have never done this before, and you're like, I might be no good at this, I don't think this is useful, or you're hundreds of hours in, or thousands of hours in, or tens of thousands of hours in. These are the kinds of thoughts that come up in a human mind. This is so normal. Yeah,
comparison in general is a common tool.
Comparison, yeah. So, there's that. And like we'll latch on to comparisons as a way to doubt ourselves. And then if there's no comparison, we'll just doubt ourselves without any comparison. It's like we'll find some way to judge ourselves. That's one of the kind of unfortunate facets of this overproductive mind.
Right.
Perhaps we can say.
Especially given the space.
Yeah. Yes, exactly.
Yeah. Well, one of the big questions I have is what's the difference between meditation versus mindfulness? And if we can get into some of the nuance around how those are different, how they might have similarities.
Yeah. Yeah, this is a great question. And I think there's a lot of quite naturally, misunderstanding about this. So fortunately, we're hearing both of these words a lot more. I think that's a good thing in our culture. Like, people are starting to do more meditation practices, and mindfulness is one of those meditation practices. Meditation more generally, I'm sure, the Webster Dictionary might have a slightly different definition. But what I would say is that meditation is a broader category. There is also a lot of mix-up, not to get too historical here, but between the word meditation and contemplation, which what we now think of as meditation, in the past, like kind of before this recent modern era, might have previously been thought of as contemplation. So those two words are kind of interchanged often. And that has a little bit to do with the way that certain Eastern texts were translated into English, and we've now come to associate meditation practices with Eastern traditions, even though actually Western traditions also have really cool meditation practices. All of that is to say, what we'll call meditation is this larger category. And meditation is any time that you are intentionally putting your mind on something, and putting your mind on something intentionally with some sort of intended way of being, or in some cases, outcome. But you're kind of putting on a lens or a way of reflecting or looking at the world. Sometimes that might be more active and analytical, like you're intentionally thinking through something. And there's some really cool, again, I'm familiar with a few Western traditions that are very specific ways of thinking through things, and Eastern traditions have these as well. And sometimes it's more of a kind of structured, almost like a exercise for the mind, right? So this might be, you do X, Y, Z, you pay attention to your breath in such and such way. So that's more like an exercise. And then sometimes it's more of just a perspective, and you're not even doing that. It's more just like, I'm going to sit here, and whatever arises is going to arise, and I'm going to meet it in this way. And so it's like there's still
awareness.
Yeah, exactly. Like that gets a little more into an open awareness kind of practice. And so, that's even a step further back. So you have the very I'm going to think in this very structured way, or you have, I'm going to do this exercise, which is slightly less structured, or you have, I'm just going to sit here, but I'm going to sit here in this way. And then the far end is this kind of spectrum of what people sometimes call non-meditation, which, hilariously will include in meditation.
Yeah.
And that's literally just sitting there, or just doing whatever it is that you're doing. And there's a handful of traditions, particularly what you'd consider non-dual traditions, that, that is the kind of at the core of their perspective, philosophy, practice, soteriology, to use that word we were just talking about a second ago. Okay, so that's meditation. Mindfulness is one very specific form of meditative practice or perspective. It's also traditionally you consider it like a characteristic or a quality of the mind to cultivate. But in our Western vernacular, we can think of mindfulness as a type of meditation practice. Generally, that's how that word is used. And principally, mindfulness practices come from the Buddhist tradition. So all sorts of different traditions from the world, they all have their own versions. They all have their own ways of doing this, and they might not call it mindfulness. And frankly, might not have been developed in as kind of staged and specific and phenomenologically exacting way. Like the Buddhist tradition really focused a lot on that. And so now we have these primarily Buddhist traditions that have come to the United States, and we have these mindfulness practices from mostly the Buddhist traditions. What I would, people have defined mindfulness in different ways, and they're lovely. There's this kind of non-judgmental moment-to-moment awareness, to say it in very brief, but, people bring in words like curiosity for the current moment, but the kind of immediacy is very important with mindfulness. So it's about what's happening right now. And I want to circle back to what that means too, because I think there's a lot of misconceptions about what does that mean to pay attention to what's happening right now.
Yeah.
So immediacy is really important in mindfulness. Intention is really important in mindfulness. And then returning. So when I kind of share about meditation and specifically about mindfulness with people, I try to boil it down to three things and try to make them more practical rather than a definition that people have to memorize and somehow relate to. Just like three very practical things. So the first is intention. And a friend and mentor of ours who we've previously interviewed, Dr. Brad, he calls intention is how you want to be, not what you want to happen. That's a goal, and goals are great too. They're important. But this is not a goal. This is an intention. This is how do I want to be no matter what happens. And then you could set a goal that I'm going to be that way such and such percent of the time, but forget about that.
Yeah.
Just the intention. So intention is one. If you're practicing, you have to have an intention. And the intention hopefully is non-judgmental or open or curious or kind. Replace any word here.
Good examples, though.
Yeah, those are great ones to go with. But, people will resonate in different ways. Some people like the more ooey gooey stuff, like, oh, I'm going to be warm and compassionate and loving. And I know a lot of people that are like, yeah, I can forget about that.
Do you know some people like that?
I don't, nobody that I can think of. And other people are like, I could do away with that and I'll just be, present without adding or subtracting. Or that might be the intention.
Yeah.
So that's one. That's intention. And then the next one, just to make it work linguistically, I like to say attention.
Yeah.
And attention, that's the immediacy piece, right? So we're placing our mind somewhere, typically. You could also say you place your mind on the present moment. That can be a little harder if you don't have as much practice built up to make that more so general, to say anything that arises right now. So you might start with just the breath or a part of your body or a sound, and we'll get into these different modes of practice too. But attention, that's the second one. So you have intention, and that's how you want to be, and attention, which is where are you placing your mind to be in the immediacy of the moment. And
last one's retention.
Yes. Have you heard me say this before?
I'm just guessing.
Great.
Well, linguistically.
Yeah, totally. So there's retention. And retention doesn't mean what we normally think of retention as like you don't let anything leave or seep out, right? Because this is actually the nature of the mind. It's going to go all over the place.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
So retention actually means to come back in this case. And that's just a clever mnemonic thing. Obviously I'm not trying to change the definition of retention, but that's a really important one because actually mindfulness comes from this word, which in Pali the word is sati. In Sanskrit it's smriti. But the word root of that word is to remember. A lot of people don't know that. They think mindfulness practice, we use this kind of in our vernacular. We say, I need to be more mindful of X, Y, Z. And what they really mean is like,
present,
I need to not forget or not be a fucking dingus or something. They're like really, they're using it almost to beat themselves up. Like, I need to not be human.
Yeah.
I was just talking to my mom the other day and she like knocked over one of my teapots. And she was like mortified. And I'm pretty sure she used this word. She was like, I just need to be more mindful. It was careless. And I was like, like this is the state of the mind. Like the only thing to be mindful of is now like returning to after the fact that you broke this teapot. Not a big deal, So mindfulness, you can think of the actual word root is not to stay focused and sharply present necessarily all the time. It's to return. It's the practice of remembering to come back. And how do we come back? We come back with our intention. I had a yoga teacher once that I had been really diligent about practice every day, sometimes twice a day. And then I was in school at the time and midterms or finals or something happened that kind of rocked my routine. And then I wasn't back for so long and that was a shame. It was just like, oh, I came back ashamed. And of course he greeted me with like such love and kindness and immediately recognized, was like, what's wrong with you? And I was, I'm ashamed, I'm blah, blah, blah about not coming back. And he was like, practice isn't about not leaving. It's in how you return. That is what practice is. It's giving yourself grace. It's coming back. And I think that's kind of what you're speaking to. Like any good practice isn't about, we're going to get distracted. We're going to have life events. We're going to have good days, bad days. But it's interrupting that bad day becoming
3 months, or
Totally.
or that habit becoming, the lack of habit being the habit.
Totally. Yeah, I love that. And I think like, the other piece here is like it works that way again, like even at the deep end, as we were talking about. It's like the mindfulness, the practice of mindfulness, or really any practice, is not this linear trajectory. And we were speaking about this recently on another episode. Like, over the course of practice, it's actually expected that you're going to dip into some places where your mind it becomes impossible to corral, and you're like totally miserable. And that's like not just practice, but that's life. It's like that's expected in your life. It's also expected as part of your meditation practice. Your mind becomes more difficult to corral, more difficult at certain moments. So again, it's just like, how do you come back? And there's some really cool neuroscience about this too, because so often, and I wonder if listeners can relate to this. I wonder if you can relate to this. I certainly can. For a long time, doing these meditation practices, maybe I'm trying to pay attention to my breath or count breaths or something, and I'm following, distracted with something, focus on something else. And as soon as I realize it, what is the first thing that I do intuitively? I get upset, and I'm like, oh.
No, I don't understand that.
But seriously, it's like, you notice it, it's frustrating. You're like, I'm not doing it. My mind is wandering. I suck at all this negative self-talk. Yeah. You feel bad in your body, which is actually a really good thing to tap into in that case. So you've got these, icky feelings. That actually trains your mind to like, A, not like to do it, but B, not to necessarily come back. Because what happens when you come back? You punish yourself.
Yeah, you have this association, a pathway that you're instantly traveling down mentally.
And so then, a wandering mind actually becomes like a refuge for you. It's like more fun, pleasant to let your mind go any which way, which actually is okay sometimes, by the way. I also want to say that. But instead, you can actually train, and I'm forgetting the name of the scientist. I want to say off the top of my head, his first name is Rick. But, he has done some cool work really showing that it's much more effective to almost like reward yourself when you come back. Like, oh, I noticed, like, cool. Like, my mind somehow worked. And there's other cool stuff. That trick might not work for everybody. There's other ways you can do that. You can try to just like be compassionate to yourself when you notice that, oh, I'm really beating myself up. But we want to be very careful about not punishing ourselves when we leave. Understand going into the practice, it's about how I come back when I come back. Not even about how many times I come back or whatever. It's how, literally, this is the critical moment. When I wander away and I come back, that is actually the critical moment of practice. Especially, without getting too deep into it, there's kind of a pathway of more learning how to settle the mind. And that does involve, wandering less. And this is helpful for that, right? Because you're setting that good pathway. But there's also a pathway of learning how to understand the mind. These are kind of mostly concurrent, but you can focus on them in different ways at different times. And your way of understanding and relating to the mind becomes much healthier and more productive if you're coming back and saying, oh, this is the nature of my mind. It's to go every which way. Why would I beat myself up about it? Why would I make it a personal thing? It's not personal at all. Every single human being is going to deal with that when they sit down to meditate, even people that are quite experienced.
Well, speaking of which way to go, I think it's interesting. There's so many different traditions. I think as someone trying to break in, it's curious, what do you choose? How do you know what's right for you? Can you break down for us some of the different styles?
Yeah.
And what might lead you to that practice in particular?
Yeah. I mean, there's too many for us to possibly even get to here. I think like the core, and, I remember, and to some extent I'm kind of in this phase again now, but I remembered early in our practice, or my practice, our practice, the royal we, all of our practice.
I appreciate that. I appreciate that I've been practicing with you.
Yeah, you have.
Well,
thank
that's
you. Actually true.
Thanks for doing all that work for me.
You're welcome.
Appreciate it.
Any day. You've done your fair share of work for me too. Solved a few serious diseases that I've had. So, okay, so there's really too many to list, but what I was going to share is like early on, like when I first came to Seattle around the time that we met, I was very much in the phase of shopping out. By the time we met, I was just about to start Zen practice. I think I had not yet started Zen practice. But I had been, for about a year at that point, more.
Shopping around.
And just trying to figure out, and I'm so glad that I did that. I really wanted that sense of comfort and security and like a place that I could drop into and go deep, because that was really what I was yearning for. But I also knew that I wanted to do that in the right context. And so I was shopping around. I was going to different temples, different ashrams in different places, reading about different traditions, seeing what felt like it resonated. And over time it's kind of like shopping for like an apartment or a house or something like that. It's like you start to get, at first it's pretty general, broad scope, and then you start to like
everything looks good.
Yeah, and everything and nothing looks quite good enough. And then you're like, okay, like I'm starting to get a sense for like what I like and what I want to do and what I want to prioritize, and B, what I can actually commit to. What's going to actually work for me. So as you shop around, you start to get a feel for those things a little bit more. Each tradition kind of has its own, to go back to this word, soteriology and ontology. Ontology being kind of your assumptions about reality, about the way that things are. And we each have those built in, whether or not we've investigated that. We each have our assumptions about the way that things are. And so as we go shopping, we'll find, oh, that really works for me, or that doesn't really work for me. Our assumption about reality might be more heavily kind of based on Western material perspectives. And I can certainly say that's when I was shopping around, I think that was at that time quite important to me. I wanted to find something that felt like it wasn't conflicting with my understanding of science, because I had a very sciencey perspective.
Yeah, I'm glad you expanded on that, because I was like, interesting.
Yeah, I was like, I need something that's not going to like be spitting in the face of what we know in the West from science. And I think that's still very important to me in a different way, though. I can get into that later. So that's kind of the ontology piece. Like, what are your assumptions about reality? Certain things might resonate with you. Others might not. Others might be curiosities, like, oh, maybe I can try this on. And then the soteriology piece, which is, the study of salvation. Salvation is actually, in and of itself, sounds like a very Christian word to me. And so that word might not resonate with you. But the idea is, what is this saving me from or supporting me in, or what's the problem really, and what's the solution to the problem? That's soteriology. And so again, you might look around and say, oh, I don't really like the way that they've framed what the problem is there. Maybe you don't like the frame of sin, and you don't like the frame of going to hell as a problem, or maybe that actually works for you. I think there's a lot of utility in that perspective. And so maybe that perspective actually does really work for you. You're like, oh yeah, that's totally my frame.
Yeah.
But then maybe you're like, I don't really like the way that they're going about solving the problem. I think in a lot of ways I was raised Jewish. Not in a lot of ways I was raised Jewish. I was raised Jewish. Completely. Well, that's actually a separate question. Depends who you ask. But there were a lot of things about the way that I was raised that I really resonate with, and I still really resonate with. But my understanding of the pathway to quote unquote salvation, I was like, yeah, I don't, this isn't doing it for me. And so that's how I found Buddhist practice. I was like, okay, this makes more sense to me.
And how are those different? What specifically resonated?
Well, Judaism does have a more kind of mystical, experiential approach, but it's a very small part of the tradition, and it's not as accessible. And actually, traditionally, it's only was encouraged to be done, once you've kind of been an adult for a while. And I was like, that was the path. I wanted a very experiential path. I was like, I see problems in myself that I want to solve, and that is very aligned with both Buddhist and yogic perspectives. And so that was really the path that I went down. I was like, okay, this is, I need to dive deep into myself and into my reality to figure out how we can do things a different way, more so than be satisfied with the way that things are and kind of follow the rules, even though I'm dissatisfied. That I didn't feel like that, but that actually really does work for some people. That's a refuge for a lot of people. I have dear friends for whom it's like, no, I want to just follow God's will and do my best to be a good person, and that's enough for me.
Typically the human brain likes less decision making.
And I'm fucked up, so
Well, thank you. That's my point.
Thanks for clarifying it for everybody.
Okay, so I think, the thing that most people are probably thinking about, curious about, is just how to start, where to start, what it looks like, that endless question, am I doing it right? Can I do it better?
Right.
So how do people get into this? Not everyone's going to have the drive to go around searching for the thing that fits, and you're so inquisitive, and you have this drive to explore and to know things deeply. What about the schmucks? Like what about the ones over here? They're like, just try and dial it in, just get a toe in there.
Totally. Well, first of all, that's a good kind of entry point into saying I didn't start my own practice like this. And first of all, this has actually come up a lot in my work in the meditation community that I run with a couple other friends, is like the goal is not necessarily for everybody to do it the way that I'm doing it or the way that people are doing even more than me are doing it. That's not necessarily the goal. Like there's all sorts of different entry points and kind of stable points that different meditation practices can be useful at. So the goal isn't to do the most, the goal isn't for everybody to become an Olympic athlete. If you want to play pickup basketball, great, go play pickup basketball. Yeah. That's awesome. I started on Headspace.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, I started, at first I'm sure it was like 5 minutes a day, and I was like, I like this. And then it was like 10 minutes a day, and then I was like, I like this. And I was
Take
like,
this for a walk. Let's do
15
12
minutes a day. Yeah.
Jumped right up.
Yeah. Already jumped up to 15. Look at that.
Wow.
Would you take a look at that?
First thing I'll do.
Yeah, that is the first thing you have to do. So I think that's a great entry point. There's all of these apps now that make it more accessible, and there's stuff on YouTube. There's even shorter form stuff I know on like TikTok and stuff, just for like a moment, like a quick hit. So there's no wrong way to get some exposure.
Yeah.
And I think having it be super easy up front is really, really important.
Yes, I do too.
So there's two immediate things that I feel like. One is doing like less volume but more consistently is really important. And that was a recommendation given to me, which I'm really glad for, was like, I was like, I'm going to set my goal to do, like, I think at that time I was like, I'm going to do 15 minutes of meditation every day. And a mentor of mine was like,
No.
Do 15 minutes whenever you want to do 15 minutes, but don't let that be your goal. Let your goal be do 5 minutes a day.
Yeah. Well, I think that's a really common question for people, is like 30 minutes once a week, the same as 5 minutes every day. Like what really creates the habit?
Yeah.
What's the way to get in to make it most effective?
Yeah, I mean, and I think the regularity is really, really useful. It also helps reduce the, of course, there's still then going to be shame if you don't do that, but setting the bar lower and making it easier to achieve means that, hey, I feel good when I did 5 minutes, and then when I want to do 10 minutes or 15 minutes, then I'll feel good about doing that too.
That goes back to that neurological imprint, right? Of like how it feels to show up. That also speaks to how we create habit, what our brain likes in order to create habit.
Right.
And in part, one of those things is back to us not wanting to make decisions. If every day we're like, how many minutes? When do I do it?
Right.
How do I start? What program am I running today?
Right.
What app am I picking today?
Right.
Like all those things stack against you and ultimately make it harder to be consistent, to show up.
100%. And so I think like the other benefit that we're kind of circling around right now that this has of setting the bar lower is that then...
I like a low bar.
Yeah, well, me too. It's also easier for you to get under if we're playing the...
I can walk right,
what's
standing
that?
straight
Yeah,
up.
totally.
Just run right under that.
Totally. Yeah, for me, it
What were you
makes it more
playing?
difficult.
A small
I was
violin?
playing a small violin, the violin of, you never growing up to be a full-size adult. Okay, so the other thing that we're circling around, though, that I think is a really big benefit to setting the bar low is that then you're doing it out of actual love and interest rather than doing it out of shame or desire to not mess up or, not have yet more confirmation that you're not taking care of yourself, you're not doing right or whatever it is.
Yeah.
Instead, it's like, no, I'm doing this because I like it, because it feels good, because I'm interested, I'm curious to go deeper into it. A teacher of mine that we actually were just talking about, Suniti, was just doing a session with her. Yeah, I hope we can have her on at some point. That'd be super cool. Yeah. I was just doing a session with her and a few other people, and she was talking about kind of just this. She was like, let practice start right now. Like, don't let it start just when you go sit down on your cushion or go, get your yoga mat out or whatever it is. Or only after you've done a certain amount. That counts as practice. Like, practice starts now. When you thought about it, okay, now practice has started. And this to me is it sounds like this wellnessy feel good thing, and there's a component to that. It's very similar to just get the running shoes on. If people have heard of that,
that's
where it's
not just a feel good thing, though.
Well, totally, and that's part of what I wanted to get into.
Yeah.
So there's that, and it's okay, this supports you to actually do it, quote unquote, at a future time. And there's that. It's the same way as okay, today I might just get my running shoes on, even if I don't go for a run. That would be the equivalent thing. So there's that. Okay, sure, it supports you in doing, quote unquote, the real thing. But from a practical, deep wisdom, non-dual standpoint, there is no reason to set up a boundary between what we're defining as practice and not practice. Practice is actually always happening. And again, as our dear friend and mentor, Dr. Brad, would say, it's what are you practicing? So as soon as you have that moment, okay, intention, attention, retention. I can be doing a mindfulness practice right now.
Yeah.
How do I want to be?
Yeah.
What am I going to pay attention to? You could pay attention to anything. You could even pay attention to stuff that doesn't feel good. You could pay attention to your own judgments about yourself. But how? What's the intention? And then let me keep coming back. And that doesn't need to start when you go sit down on the cushion.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think a practical thing for people to hear is the goal should be so low that it would feel embarrassing not to accomplish, right? So for some people, that is actually I go after work and I put my running shoes on, and I don't have to leave. I don't have to do anything with those shoes. I'm that is me honoring this practice, this step, So it's finding the line and then committing to that. I can go for a 2-minute walk every day, and if it's 2 minutes, that accomplishes what I intend to accomplish. And a lot of times it'll be more than that, and a lot of times 2 minutes will feel very long and very challenging. And so I think for people at home that are, it's oh, I don't know where to start, 5, 10, 15, whatever it is. It's hit a really genuinely low place, a low bar, something super attainable, and the consistency is the key.
Yeah. And this is something in my own practice that I've sometimes struggled with, because I have set a high bar for myself.
Yeah.
I said, okay, well,
you be doing that.
It doesn't, I'm okay, well, now I get this idea that it doesn't count unless I do such and such minutes, or maybe it's not even that it doesn't count, because it's not so much about counting, but I'm is it worth my time? Maybe I'll just do something different.
Or this morning, right? It's you even said, I didn't sit as long as I intended.
Yeah, exactly. I was I didn't sit as long as I intended, and not a big deal.
Not to call you out, but
no.
He didn't sit as long as he did.
Guys, I'm a phony. So, but like, and there's certain traditions that actually will really reinforce this, unfortunately. It'd be like, yeah, it's really not worth your time unless, there's certain traditions that are like, it's not worth your time unless you sit an hour. Don't even do it, which I think is totally silly. I think that's ludicrous. And then, every permutation of that, it's not worth your time unless X, Y, Z. And it's like, that's frankly stupid. Like I will say that's stupid. There are benefits that happen if you reach a certain amount of time. There are places that your mind can click into that just take time. And so I definitely recommend to people like, oh yeah, if you're curious, if you're interested, if you want to carve out an hour and find a comfortable seat, like that's a cool experiment. Like you'll probably find some interesting stuff, but like that should not be a measure of whether it's worth doing or not.
It's interesting stylistically that happens in medicine too, and especially behavioral medicine, where it's like, this is what you have to do in order to be successful or see this change, or, this is the program to health or whatever it might be. And like, I have colleagues that won't work with someone unless they've done their homework. They don't get to return if they haven't done the things that they were told to do. I had a therapist like this
actually, and it was rough. Actually, it was, I got a lot out of it.
Yeah.
And it was like stressful. I didn't feel supported like that. It was an interesting dynamic. I was like, I did a lot of personal work, which was actually super helpful to this day to me. Yeah. And like, there was it did not feel safe at all. It was like always really stressful. And it was like, I kind of like also just wanted somebody to support me through a difficult time. Unfortunately, my therapist now is not like that at all. He's amazing.
So it's interesting just the different, like whether you meet people where they are, help encourage, that to help them along versus like standing in one place demanding that they behave a specific way. Yeah. And so, we can use that softness in ourselves as well. Like we're taking small steps with, towards the thing instead of being like shoved and pushed in a way that doesn't feel good or like you said, it's like, I got things out of it, but it was awful. Yeah. Like how long are you going to do that? Totally. Before you're like,
only work for so long.
Yeah.
Yeah, and most of us could stand to actually develop some of those qualities for ourselves. Like if we're not engaging with these kinds of practices for that purpose, then what's the point? Like if this shouldn't be, don't make this another like wellness project. I think it's Pema Chodron who says that. A number of people have said that, but I vaguely recall her saying that, like, this isn't just another wellness project for you. I have other teachers that used to say that, like, don't let it be that. It's actually undermining it. And if it becomes that, okay, like there's some extent to which that's okay, but like let this be an actual gift to yourself. Like that is the perspective to come at this from. If it's just another thing to do, if it's just another kind of fitness, there's other approaches that actually might be more suitable. This should be come at from a different perspective. Okay, so there's one last thing that we had talked about before about ways to support yourself as you're founding a practice. And that's this habit stacking piece. I'm curious, what you want to say about that, building things into a routine.
Yeah, I think that's such a super important piece of habit formation. And, the point of habit stacking is, in a sense, to decrease the obstacles, but by making us have to think about less things, plan for less things. If you're like, oh, I'll hit the gym sometime after work, and then you're leaving work and it's like, oh, I didn't cook dinner. Well, I didn't walk the dog. Well, I didn't, so you're every day there's a fluidity in there that allows, creates stress for the brain to make decisions around, essentially. So really it's ideal for people when they're trying to start something new. Yes, it's a attainable thing that they're setting their goal as, but even more so that it's linked to something that already happens. I'm trying to take my supplements. I'm horrible at taking my supplements. So it's like, well, do you brush your teeth every night? Hopefully.
We have known people that don't.
I know.
No judgment. There might be a little bit of judgment.
I'm judging you.
I that's an interesting one for me because I'm like, I got the beatus.
Yeah.
I got to brush my teeth. My teeth still be motherfucking yellow. So it's like...
Yeah, but that's not why we're brushing them.
I know, but I expect them to look good,
Yeah,
And
well,
they don't.
you have beautiful teeth. You, so, the point of that is that if there's already a habit in place, it's so much easier to stack something right on top of that. Like the minute I put down my toothbrush, I pick up my supplement. Or, like every day there's something that I come home every day after work. So it's like every day after work, right away, before you start doing something else, you commit to this thing that you want to implement.
Yeah.
So I think that's just a helpful thing for people to realize when they're trying to plan to introduce something new in their life.
Always put it next to before or right after, and make sure that there's nothing in between. Mm-hmm. Whether it's a brushing the teeth or, making your bed or something. If that's something you do, it's like as soon as I do X, then I do Y.
I turn off my alarm clock every day.
Right.
So as soon as I'm done doing that, I pull up the covers, make the bed.
Right.
Yeah.
Then there's this question of what counts as meditation practice?
That's a good question.
Yeah. I'm curious, and I think you have some perspectives on this too, Heather. It's like how we go about things matters a lot. You can do the same outward activities, and that might be meditation, or it might be caring for yourself, or it might not be.
Yeah, so it's does it count am I meditating if I say I'm going to meditate first thing in the morning and I turn off my clock and I kind of roll over and lay in bed and then my timer goes off and I get up? Is that meditating?
Right.
Does that count?
I mean, yes and no. And again, it's there's this important question of why are we asking ourselves this question? Are we asking ourselves this question so that we can beat ourselves up more?
Yeah.
Just be aware of that, because you'll find an answer and then you'll find a way to bludgeon yourself with the answer. So does that count? I mean, I actually think it can be a beautiful practice first thing in the morning. And I actually do this sometimes. In that period of time when we first met, I actually did this a lot, where alarm would go off. I would set it to snooze, but really genuinely try not to go back to sleep, and lay there to try to actually start the day in a really pleasant way. And I would basically be like, before I do anything, let me check in with my body, especially because mornings for me tend to be really unpleasant. I tend to, when I wake up, immediately be flooded with unpleasant sensations and not want to start the day. And so at that time, I would literally just lay there and scan my body and try to relax. During other periods of time where I've noticed that I just end up falling back asleep immediately, and nothing wrong with that, but I was like, this is not really serving the intended purpose. And so I stopped doing that for a while. And now I'm doing that a little bit more again.
Yeah.
Because I find it really pleasant to just lay there for a moment before jumping in.
I like your belly shirt.
Thank you. It was higher up than intended. So does it count? It really depends, how's it going for you? Do you feel like it's working? There's no outward measure. If you are using it as a way to just snooze, secretly you just want to snooze, just snooze. Just get a little more rest. And if you're not, and you're but I might fall back asleep sometimes, also there's no problem with that. Just pay attention while you're falling back asleep. I remember one time I was really struggling with falling asleep during a retreat, and my teacher, Genjo Roshi, he was like, yeah, just pay attention to yourself falling asleep. And at first I was like, how do you do that? You're falling asleep. And then I realized oh, you actually can. You can notice yourself going in and out of sleep. And we think that there's something wrong with that, practicing in that state, but actually practice in every single state.
Yeah. Yeah, I like that. Yeah, I kind of agree with you. It's if you're using that to pretend that you're working on something, it's like you said, just hit snooze, enjoy your snooze.
Yeah.
But if that's where you are, you commit to this thing, eventually the next step is coming where it's oh, I think I can sit up today.
Yeah.
And this week, you're building. So if that's where you are and where you feel comfortable and good and where you're going to show up, and that's to your point,
right,
showing up.
Or maybe that's enough, right? Maybe that is your practice. Maybe your practice is the 10-minute snooze period, and you're like, that really works for me when I start my day like that, and like, no need to add anything in beyond that.
I like that you said that.
Yeah, I think it's so easy to be like, okay, fine, I'll start with X, Y, Z minutes, but like,
then I need
but
to.
really, it's like, and it's so easy to undermine ourselves.
Totally.
That way. It's like, no, whatever we're doing is just what it needs to be.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that there's another thing that comes up, I think, for new meditators is just like, I can't still my mind. I'm all over the place. Does that count? If I sat down and was just doing what I normally do, which is ruminate and catastrophize and does that count, or am I making the pathways deeper that I'm trying to reset? Like, where do you fall on that?
Yeah. So first of all, it does count, and as we mentioned earlier, like, and again, I think this word count is kind of problematic in and of itself, but I'll use it in this case to say, keep going, keep practicing. The mind, that you're actually in a period of learning about what your mind does, and that actually can be quite unpleasant. It can be pretty unpleasant to pull back the curtain and be like, I'm a total mess in my mind.
Yeah.
I have very little control from one moment to the next over what happens to it. And, you might think, okay, well, the pathway is to learn how to get more control. Actually, what you find as you practice more is the pathway is to learn that you have less and less control, and ultimately that you actually have no true control. There's some amount of like influence and surfing that can happen. But even your sense of like intention or control is like fabricated, and it's just a result of the previous moment's experience. But okay, not to go in too deep on that. The point is, yes, like it counts, and yes, keep going,
Yeah.
The important thing, especially during a period like that where it's feeling so messy and frustrating, is coming back to this intention. It's like you focus on retention, you focus on, okay, like I'm having to cycle back to remember more. Fine, no problem. We already said that's the practice. It's coming back. But then how am I coming back?
Yeah.
And really, really doing whatever you need to do, like getting creative with like, how do I remember my intention of how I want to come back? That's, I think, the most important during this messy mind period. But the object, especially with a more kind of insight, wisdom perspective, which is hopefully a perspective that we get out of meditation practice, the object is not actually to learn how to manipulate or control your mind or reality. It's to learn about how it works.
So what am I doing when I'm sitting there ruminating or sitting for my 5 minutes?
You're being taught by your mind, actually, and I think that's a good way to look at it. Like, you're being taught by your mind at how much it sucks to cycle through these different states of mind to become so fixated and locked on. So you're being taught that, and you're also being taught that you don't have that much control over it. And that's uncomfortable. That actually causes us a lot of physical, not just emotional, but physical discomfort in our bodies. And ultimately, I heard it said recently, one of the cool perspectives that Buddhism brings is it actually tries to direct you to your suffering. And by paying attention to what's making you suffer, you actually learn a lot more quickly, and you grow and develop a lot faster. And so by paying attention to the way that our minds cause us pain, discomfort, we learn a lot more, what's it called? Kind of like a dissatisfaction or dispassion is actually a better word. Like a dispassion with what's going on with our mind, because it's like, I don't want to put my stake in that, like I remember there was one time I was sitting in a cafe, and I was talking to a Zen monk who was a friend and kind of a mentor of mine at that time. And he was like, how was your retreat? And I was like, or maybe it was just a sit. He was like, how was your sit? And I was like, yeah, it was good. But, my mind it's all over the place and just wandering. And that's kind of annoying, but like, it was fine. He was like, your mind? And I was like, yeah, that thing that's like always like chatting. I was like, fuck, this guy is like really beyond it like that. Like, okay,
nothingness.
I guess I got work to do. He was like, your mind? And I was like, yeah, that thing that like is always running and cycling in the background and like, that you think. And he was like, what makes you think it's your mind? And I was like, I mean, only I experience it, and like, blah, blah, blah. And I tried, I couldn't really explain myself, but I kind of fumbled over an explanation. He was like, well, have you tried to control it? Have you tried to tell it to stop? And I was like, yeah, it doesn't tend to work that well. And he was like, yeah, so why even claim it as your mind? And that was always really interesting. Like, I've always found that useful to bring that perspective in. It's like, okay, like, this is what's happening. Nobody else hears this inner monologue, sometimes very fortunately. But like, I don't need to claim it or own it or take it as personal. It's just the stream of experience. It's no different than, the feeling of the air on my skin or the clothes, or me realizing that, the skin on my belly is exposed because there's a cool breeze floating over it, It's actually all fundamentally the same. It's not fundamentally different. And for some reason, we lay claim to our minds in a different way. But this is an opportunity for us to actually step back and let go of them.
Yeah. Well, along that vein, what tips or tricks do you have for people in the early iteration of meditation?
Yeah.
How would you direct them to come back to their intention? What skills can we actually offer?
Yeah, I mean, the first, which we already mentioned, is like being very clear about what the intention is. So that's really important, and connecting to it at a kind of experiential, emotional level. And so sometimes it helps to think about loved ones or think about peaceful times in our life or places we feel at peace to really help us connect to like, all right, what is that intention? How can I really bring that in and remind myself what that feels like?
Yeah, or if your intention is to generate, loving kindness and
Yeah, exactly. So that's step one. And then step two goes to attention. So it's the kind of the immediacy point. It's like, what am I going to be with? Again, there's also practices where you don't intentionally choose a thing. And those are good too. I definitely recommend that. But let's say for the purpose of starting a practice, it's very useful to actually have as a very specific object and not open yourself up that much. And so,
And what do you mean by a specific object?
Yeah. So this is really the thing that you're setting your mind on, that you're placing your mind on, and saying, okay, during this period of time, this is what I'm paying attention to. And when it falls away, I'll bring it back to this.
Yeah. So for example, for people starting, a lot of times we focus on our breath.
Yeah.
And the intention is that we're really paying, inhaling and exhaling and noticing that experience.
Right.
And how it feels in our chest and how it feels in our mouth and nose. And so the object in that case would be that you're focusing on your breath.
Right.
Other beginning meditation skills can be actually physically being aware. How does it feel in my feet?
Yeah.
How does it feel in my ankles? How does it feel in my knees?
Right.
Right, where your intention is physical awareness.
Right.
And so any other, examples of that really specific, like if I don't know what I'm doing, if I sit down, like, I get that it's an object, but what the fuck do I do with that?
Totally.
Right?
Well, okay, so this is another thing, is like different people's minds are wired in very different ways. And so the first is finding an object or an anchor that like feels engaging to you. And I think the classic one is the breath, and that's almost become kind of like canned. Like there's really good reason to focus on the breath. It teaches you a lot about your mind as well and about your body. So breath is great to work with. I think often the way that we work with the breath, we don't even realize is not actually the most effective way.
Maybe we should touch on that.
And let's touch on that too.
Yeah.
So, but there's paying attention to your breathing. You mentioned the body, and you can do the body just paying attention to one part, or you can do a body scan. There's different ways to do body scanning.
Yes, scanning, and then what hurts or what's uncomfortable,
Yeah,
and then
exactly.
just tending to that specific area,
Right.
breathing into that space. Yeah.
Right. And then, and going back to intention, there's actually, we think about intention as non-judgmental or curious, but we can also bring in different kinds of intentions too. We can bring an intention to notice, still non-judgmentally or curiously, specific aspects of our experience or of our object's experience, like, change, the way that it's constantly changing, or the way that it's uncomfortable, or the way that we want more of it. So there's that kind of, dis-ease kind of attention, or the way that it arises and leaves without us needing to do anything, right? It's like actually has nothing to do with us. It's impersonal. So that's just going back to intention. But this attention piece, you can pay attention to sounds. And there's lots of ways to do that. You can set a really cool soundscape in the background and just listen to that while you're meditating. You can pay attention to the sounds of the space that you're in already. And again, these are very general. There's many ways of even doing that, right? Like paying attention to sound. How am I paying attention to sound? There's a number of different ways to do that. There's visuals, right? So you can use a picture of something and you can actually basically stare at it. Eventually you might end up closing your eyes and seeing it behind your eyes. And you can practice with that.
A candle.
That's one that I just did on retreat a lot. There's mantras, which is kind of internal speech. You could also be saying a mantra out loud, but let's say for our purposes here, mostly internal speech. You're saying something to yourself. It's very common to also attach mantras to other types of practices, like a breath, or even a body scan.
Yeah, you're repeating a phrase over and over.
Right. Right. And actually, one thing that people don't realize, when you're counting the breath, we think that's paying attention to breath, but most of the time people are paying attention to the number, not the breath. And that's actually paying attention to the mind.
Yeah.
That's not actually paying attention. And there's nothing wrong with that. That's actually useful too. But that's much more similar to a mantra in that case. And you're just timing it with your breath. So, again, this can be an effective practice. One thing I want to say about breathing is just that. I think, we get this idea that we know how to pay attention to our breath, and so we don't really investigate that much when we get the instruction to pay attention to your breath. But it's like, oh my God, this is like a oceanically large number of different things that I can pay attention to and ways that I can attend to my breath. One perspective that's been really useful to me to remember is that, like, paying attention to your breath is actually just a facet of paying attention to your body. And so they're not separate. Like, your breath is occurring as part of your bodily experience. And so when we pay attention to our breath, it can be very useful to have some degree of awareness of our entire body, or at least portions of our body, and the way that they're moving with the breath.
I do think that's a little bit more advanced, though, right? That to have, for a lot of people, just even getting into, like you said, how do I find attention to my breath?
Yeah.
I'm counting, I'm not really doing it. So, like, what are the ways that we can attune to that?
Yeah, there's lots of different places that you can pay. Like, your chest rises and falls with each breath. So you can notice your chest, or people will intentionally try to breathe into their belly, and you can notice your belly. You can notice the air flowing in and out of your nose. There's kind of some movement that tends to happen right here. So those are all places you can pay attention to. But I actually would push back on saying it's more advanced. I think it sounds more complicated, but it's actually more engaging. And that to me is the most important. That kind of gets to this next piece of, like, making sure that your practice is in some way engaging. And so, like, rather than saying I'm going to go for something that, in this case, I actually think from an engagement standpoint, set the bar higher. From a accomplishment standpoint, set the bar lower. But from an engagement standpoint, go for the most engaging thing. Like, even if it's like, okay, it feels like, if I'm paying attention to my breath, but I'm noticing my whole body as I'm doing it. It's like, might start to feel complicated or something, but, like, that can actually be quite engaging. And there's imagination that you can bring into this as well. Like, and I didn't used to do this, and I kind of, it was like kind of a breakthrough, and I was like, oh, this is really cool. Like, I actually like this. Imagining breathing in, and like you're breathing in for your whole body from head to toe, and it's like, well, that's silly. My breath doesn't go to my feet.
Or like imagining a color on the in-breath going out to your fingertips.
Yes.
And then going, you're drawing it down with each in-breath.
And I used to totally think that was silly. And now I think it's silly that I thought that was silly. Because those are just as real experiences. Like, everything that we experience is funneled through and created by our mind. And so, like, we don't need to prioritize one way of attending to our moment-to-moment experience over another. And what's more, if I'm paying attention to, my whole body breathing, like breathing into my toes, is my respiration going there per se? No. But is my breath actually creating a physiological change that goes all the way down to my toe on that same cycle? Absolutely. So actually, you can feel your breath in your feet, right? It might not be in this kind of logical, very limited way that we're thinking about, but in just the same way with the colors. It's like, if I'm imagining breathing in that color, there's almost an intention in there too. I might associate certain feelings with the color, and it's helping me pay attention to changes that are happening throughout my body. So,
and another good trick, I think, is like inhaling something you want to bring into your life, your experience, your spirit, exhaling something you want to release from your lived experience.
That's a great way. Love that. So I think this really kind of captures this last piece that we wanted to touch on here, which is like, make sure the practice is interesting, engaging, fun. Not that it will always be every single set. You will get bored. But from the outset, from a bigger picture perspective, if it feels like work and it feels like it's not really that interesting for you, but you're doing it because you're supposed to do it this way, it's like, don't do it that way. Do it in a way that's going to feel fun and experimental and exploratory for you.
Yeah. Which I think sometimes that can be hard to find as a beginner.
Yeah.
Without that's not always the easiest thing to uncover.
Yeah. Yeah. It takes experimenting. It takes messing around and being like, oh, did I like it more when I did this, or did I like it more when I did that? Or so that's that shopping kind of component.
No, I do like to shop.
No, you do.
So I guess there's actually quite a bit of research out there about different types of practice and how it influences brain patterns and impacts our sympathetic versus parasympathetic nervous system. Yeah. Do you have any insight on, which practices are better, or what research is out there that's useful for us that you can distill?
Yeah, I mean, I love that you asked about this, because I think this can be an incredibly motivating factor for us, too, to be like, okay, yeah, people like this, but they might be weird or different than me.
What does it do even? What am I getting out of the deal?
Yeah, so fortunately, there's really good research that exists, which, has kind of told us from a empirical kind of Western science standpoint, this stuff is really good for you. And good for you. It's science.
Hold on.
You nailed it on that one.
Yeah.
Okay. So, science. So, okay. So, as far as what's better than another, that, there hasn't been a lot of head-to-head research between different traditions. So we have research on many different traditions and practices, but not as much head-to-head.
Right.
And so there's a lot more
practice
actually.
Versus nothing.
Yeah. And so that's actually I mentioned Dr. Daniel Ingram, who I was just on retreat with. That's something that he's really passionate about and working on with the EPRC and a lot of really, really amazing scientists. So, hopefully EPRC. Hopefully over the next few decades, over the next decade, we can learn a lot about how different traditions compare head to head and what each one is better for. But, probably the tradition, quote unquote, let's use that word lightly, that has the most research in Western science is MBSR, which is mindfulness-based stress reduction. MBSR, not to go too deep, it was started by Jon Kabat-Zinn, I want to say in the 70s, if I'm remembering correctly. May have been not till the 80s. But he basically distilled a lot of these, this was kind of part of the foundation of the mindfulness movement. There already was a lot of this practice going on in the US, but he brought it into a more secular format that could be practiced in medical, clinical settings. And as a result, it's been researched probably more than any other tradition. And there's just like incredible research on this showing that, regular practice over a few weeks can reduce, clinical anxiety and depression symptoms, reduce stress. It can have physiological benefits for people with different autoimmune conditions. Like there is a lot in there.
That's cool.
So pretty extensive on that. I mean, these are empirically good for you. Empirically good for you, which is not to say again that you can't actually be pushed into some difficult states because of meditation, which is also true. You can, and I'd like to have more conversation about that during our podcast time together. But empirically speaking, these practices are good for you. They're good for your mind and they're good for your body. And then there's other kinds of research on more, what we would think of in the West as like heart-centered practices. So this is the loving kindness. This is the compassion or self-compassion practices. I remember there was one paper just off the top of my head where I think they did like a 5 or 10 minute loving kindness guided meditation. I forget what the comparison was. They did have some comparison. And the people that did this, short practice felt like immediately, like they only did one practice. They felt more connected to others, like by a significant margin. So like less social isolation. I'm vaguely remembering that this was some kind of Good Samaritan experiment where like they, saw somebody struggling and like many more people stepped in to help after they'd done. So like there's really cool, there's really cool stuff.
Yeah, loving kindness practices I really enjoy them.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, we could do a whole episode on that, and I would love to.
Yeah.
So, there's that whole facet. And then people think, oh, well, this stuff kind of makes you a little soft, though. It might not be as good for, like, the workplace. And I remember, there's a good friend of mine that really focuses a lot on self-compassion. And there's research with self-compassion actually showing that when you have more self-compassion, you're more effective in some of these professional contexts. And so, and then there's the deep end of stuff. And there is some really interesting research on the deep end about how like fundamentally brain structures change. Or there's research that has shown that after a meditation retreat or after maybe a few years of consistent retreats, your telomeres, which are kind of one way of marking cellular aging, so literally your body's aging, they had essentially aged less. They had frayed less. Yeah. And so literally you're like helping your body stay younger and healthier as you engage more in these practices. Other things about changing fundamentally the way that your mind responds to, unpleasant or fear-inducing sensations, which are really cool research that's been done, especially with these experienced Tibetan Buddhist meditators. So there's a lot of really cool stuff out there, which hopefully serves as a great inspiration for us.
I know, we'll have to dive into that as well.
Totally, yeah. And we'll include some links. There's some great books on this stuff that really, I think, can serve as a motivation for us to at least dip our toes in the water and get started.
Okay, so I think, some of the take-home messages from today, one is that we want to set...
Just fucking with you. I'm sorry. I couldn't help myself. Okay, sorry. Please.
Some of the take-homes, I think, from today are first of all, intention, attention, and retention. Yeah. I think that's fabulous to think about.
No tension.
And no tension.
Forget about the tension.
Drop it.
Drop it.
Drop it. Yeah, I think that's a great way to orient to what practice is, what it looks like. I think a couple other things that I think are really important for people to remember is how to return, right? The practice is in returning. The practice is in having grace with yourself. That we want to set attainable goals, things that feel really achievable, that you can be consistent with, that we habit stack that. We link them up to something that already exists to make that easier to show up for. I think those are some of the main tips. And then, we touched on a lot of tools for the beginning meditator around, what to try to focus on, their breath, a candle, these various ways to engage the mind, and try to teach it to behave differently, or allow it to behave differently, maybe I should say.
Yeah. Or let it teach itself through experience.
Yeah.
I think that's the best way.
Yeah.
I mean, most important to me is like, find what you love, find what feels interesting and exciting, and don't let it be a job. Like, let it be a curious exploration.
Right.
I think it's Rumi says there's a million ways to kneel and kiss the ground. And like, that's to me totally what meditation is about. There's a million ways to do this thing that you love and that your mind wants to orient itself to. And you might not have found it yet, but keep experimenting. Have fun.